So today I'm going to talk about algorithms. Not though it's a fine-grained complexity, I'll talk about algorithms because algorithms and complexity, they go hand by hand. And to maintain the theme of the workshop, it will be fine-grained algorithms. So as we know, in fine-grained complexity, we do not call polynomial time as efficient, and we try to understand the true efficiency, whether a problem runs in n cube time versus n square versus n to the 1.5 linear, and so on. And you really cannot do this if you, given the current status of complexity theory, unless you make stronger conjectures. You need stronger conjectures to differentiate these problems, these various low polynomial time complexities. So there are many stronger conjectures like exponential time hypothesis, strong exponential time hypothesis, APSP hardness, all-pair shortest path hardness, three-sum hardness, and so on. This is how before the work on fine-grained complexity, there were many problems in polynomial time complexity, like important problems. People always tried to design faster algorithms for them, but they didn't understand the connections among these problems. And now, due to work of everyone in this fine-grained complexity community, now polynomial time problems do have very nice structures. We understand the connections among them, and so on. And in fact, complexity results, they do not always make it to the news, but fine-grained complexity became so popular that it even made it to the news. And not only that, there were even critics, and when there are critics, you know it has really reached the peak. So, so the news items were about when the result by Piotr and Arthurs came out in 2015. About that computing edit distance requires n squared time, assuming strong exponential time hypothesis. And the media was really excited about this because edit distance is used very frequently for comparing genome sequences. But then there was this biologist, he was from Berkeley at that time, now he's at Caltech, and he claimed in biology, we solve edit distance problems regularly. So what is this complexity results really talking about? And he made some claim that in biology, n does not go to infinity. I didn't understand what he is trying to say. But what I felt like in real problems, often you have maybe you have more structures that you can use to make the algorithms run faster. Or sometimes when we are saying we are using edit distance to compare genome sequences, it's really a model that we are using. And when you are making a model, it's probably okay to not compute the optimal results. So maybe you can compute some results which is close to optimal, and that's good enough to get the insight that you are trying to get. So we can design approximation algorithms, and that might run much faster than exact algorithms. So that's what we call fine-grained approximation algorithms, and that's what's going to be the topic of this talk. And when you are allowing approximation, often the lower bounds that we see, they break down. So there is a hope that you can use approximation and can design algorithms that run much faster. And indeed, there are quite a few progress in that. Here are a few examples. So string edit distance, which I just mentioned, that in string edit distance, you are given two strings. One is the reference string and another one is the input string, and you want to know how many edits you need to do on your input string to make it look like the reference string. So here in this example, if you delete t, if you substitute this a with c, so then it becomes acc, it matches here. And when you go here, if you insert another t, you get this tt. So with 3 edits, you can make your reference string look, input string look like the reference string. So the edit distance is 3. You cannot get an algorithm better than n squared, assuming strong ETH, but if you allow approximation, if you allow constant factor approximation, you can go below n squared. So it's a result from Fox 2018, which got the best paper award there. Before that, in 2010, there was a result which gets near linear time by Ravi, who is here. Alex and Christoph, where they get a linear time algorithm with polylogarithmic approximation. And recently we have a paper where we get sublinear time algorithm with obviously worse approximation factor. So you can see these trade-offs between approximation factor and running time for string edit distance. All-pair shortest path. So all-pair shortest path is the basis of a PSP hardness, that all-pair shortest path on weighted graphs you cannot compute below n cube, and using that there are many graph problems, matrix problems that you can show that they are equivalent or as to a PSP. But if you allow approximation, you can get 1 plus epsilon approximation for it into the omega time, where omega is the exponent of fast matrix multiplication. This is a result by Ure Zwick from 1998, and I also had a paper in Fox 2015 where you can get similar results using a different technique, and that works for other problems like stochastic grammar parsing. This is a problem that's very frequently used for statistical natural language processing, and it also, if you want exact solution, it's stuck at n cube, but allowing 1 plus epsilon approximation, you can reduce the running time. Here are a few other examples. Dike edit distance, it's used very frequently for repairing different types of syntaxes. For example, you have a LaTeX document, so you have begin equation, end equation, and so on. Like you want those open parentheses and the closed parentheses to match up. So that's kind of Dike, and if they do not match up, you want to know how many edits you need to do to make them match up. So that's Dike edit distance. It's actually generalized string edit distance, and it's harder than string edit distance. You can show conditional lower bounds that, well, Dike edit distance is at least as hard as Boolean matrix multiplication. So it's harder than edit distance. And using approximation, you can reduce its running time to linear, and you can get approximation factors. If you think about what is the approximation factor known for edit distance in near linear time, within another log factor, you will get the approximation factor for Dike edit distance, okay? Though in terms of, so there is a gap of log n, but that's between edit distance and Dike edit distance when it comes to approximation. Another problem is RNA folding. So RNA folding is a very basic computational biology problem. It's introduced in 1980 by Jacobson and Lusinov, and you can get an n-cube algorithm for it. And with approximation, you can reduce the running time to n squared. And we had a result in Fox 2016 where we showed that in fact you can compute it exactly in less than cubic time. Okay, so there are all these different problems, and you can, and using approximation, we can often get much better running time. Now the question is there a way that we can design some generic techniques that we can apply and get this kind of faster algorithms? This is in general a very hard question to answer, even if we look at NP-hard problems, for which there is this long literature on approximation algorithms. Is a very hard question, right? But in that context, maybe when you have an NP-hard problem, a generic way will be that you model it as an integer linear program, then you write a linear programming relaxation, and then you do LP rounding. So the question is, for this kind of polynomial time problems where you are trying to design fast approximation algorithms, could there be such generic ways that you can apply and you can get faster algorithms? So one way that we may achieve that is if you look at all these examples, how did you get the exact solution for it, whether it's string edit distance, whether it's all-pair shortest path computation, whether Dike edit distance, RNA folding. For all of them, you use dynamic programming. And these dynamic programmings are generally not so efficient in terms of space, in terms of time. So the question is, now you have this dynamic programming, could there be some generic way that you take these dynamic programmings and make them faster, make them space efficient, and so on? So here I like to tell you about two ways that you might be able to achieve that. So one is you take this dynamic programming and view it as computing fast matrix multiplication, okay, under certain computing matrix multiplication under certain structures, or you take a dynamic programming and you do what we call amnesic dynamic programming, where in dynamic programming you maintain some states, and in amnesic dynamic and because you have to maintain a lot of states, that's why dynamic programming have high time complexity, space complexity, and in amnesic dynamic programming you will try to forget some of the states in a clever way so that you can save on time and space. Okay. So we will look at these two ways of doing it, and for that we will use this problem as an example. It's called language edit distance. So it's a pretty generic problem. For example, RNA folding, Dike edit distance, these are all special cases of language edit distance. All pair shortest path is not a special case, but it's very closely related to it. So what is a language edit distance problem? So it generalizes context-free grammar parsing or recognition. In context-free grammar recognition, what you have a grammar. So this is your grammar. So these are the grammar rules, and you are given a string, and you want to know whether this string can be parsed according to the rules of the grammar. Okay. So here the first string, it can be parsed according to. So basically, this grammar generates all strings with these round and square brackets, which are well balanced. So the first string you can generate it according to the grammar, but the second string is not part of the language, so you cannot generate it. So that's context-free grammar parsing. And what is language edit distance? So in language edit distance, you are given again you are given a grammar and you are given an input string. And this input string may not belong to the language, and you want to know what are the minimum changes you need to do on your input string to make it belong to the language. Okay, so that way generalizes context-free grammar parsing. In parsing, you are asking whether it belongs or not. Here you are asking if it doesn't belong, what are the edits you need to do in your string to make it belong to the language. And as you can see, this is also generalizes string edit distance, because in string edit distance you have a single reference string, and you want to make minimum edits on your input string to make it look like the reference string. And here you have a lot of reference strings, all the strings that can be generated according to the grammar. Those which are in the language, they are all your reference strings, and you are asking, given your input string, what are the minimum edits you need to do on your input string, so that it looks like at least one of the strings in your among the reference strings. Okay, so that's the language edit distance. It has an old history. So it was introduced in 1972 to design error correcting parsers. So suppose you write your programs in your favorite programming language, maybe C++, and you made errors, and you have this language edit distance tool that when you submit your program, it will automatically correct it. Okay, so that was the hope that was the reason why this problem was studied in 1972. And you can design a dynamic programming algorithm for it that runs in n cube time, where n is the string length. Obviously, there was some dependency on the grammar size, on the language size, and that improved from quadratic to linear. But the n cube time remained from 1972, and this problem has been used in various other applications, like in databases, where you are given your data which is noisy and you want to correct the noise. Okay, you want to denoise the data, and as I said, in error correcting parsers, in computational linguistics, where you can make grammatical mistakes, and if you have a model for your grammar, you can use that to correct your text. And in biology, in RNA sequences and RNA folding, these are all can be seen as a special case of language edit distance. Okay, so let's look at the dynamic programming for language edit distance, how you can do it. So what we are trying to do, we are given a language, you are given a string, and you want to know how many edits you need to do on your string to make it belong to the language. And what kind of edits do you allow? You allow substitutions, you allow insertions of symbols, and you allow deletions of symbols. So what you do, you have the regular rules of the grammars. These are written in white. So these are the regular rules of the grammar. You introduce some other rules which will handle this substitution, insertions, and deletions. Okay, so for example, so this small n and small b are the actual symbols of your string, and these are your intermediate states. Okay, so here this rule is saying from this intermediate state capital R, you can generate your symbol small a. Now, if you want to allow substitution, you will say, okay, so my intermediate state capital R can also generate small b, but for that I have to pay a cost because I'm substituting. So my cost will be the whatever the cost for substitution. Suppose it's like you are considering insertion, deletion, substitution, all of them cost 1, so then it will be just cost 1. Okay, similarly here capital L was generating small b. You are allowing substitution, so capital L now generates small a as well. Okay, so these are the rules for substitution. Similarly, you can have rules for insertions and deletions. So now once you have the regular rules, so for each of the regular rules you have a score of 0, and you are introducing these error producing rules for which you are assigning score to them. And now once you have this augmented grammar, your language edit distance really becomes that you are given this string, you want to compute a parse of that string of minimum total score. Okay? And you can do it using dynamic programming. So suppose you want to compute the score for substring I to j. So you are given this string, you are looking at a substring I to j, and you want to compute what is the edit distance, what is the score for I to j. You look at all possible breakpoints, intermediate points. Say from I to k minus 1, this can be generated from capital A with a score of x, and k to j, it can be generated from capital B with a score of y. Then how can you generate the substring I to j? Well, as you can see here, there is a rule which combines capital A and capital B. So you know I to k minus 1 can be generated from capital A, and k to j can be generated from capital B. So I to j can be generated from C, capital C, by combining, right? And what would be the score for this generation? Like I to k minus 1, to generate I to k minus 1 from A, you are paying x. From k to j, you are paying y. So in order to generate I to j, you will pay x plus y. Okay, so z is x plus y. And if there are multiple x's and multiple y's, you will be paying minimum of x plus y. Okay, mean plus. So what's the running time? So you are maintaining a n square size dynamic programming table, and you are computing each of this entry, you have to look at all possible breakpoints k. So computation of each entry will require linear time, therefore overall it will take you order of n cube time and n square space. So now I want to make it run faster than n cube using approximation, and for that we will try to view this computation of this dynamic programming as computing matrix multiplication, computing transitive closure under a different kind of matrix multiplication. Okay? So here is an alternate viewpoint. It's basically doing the same thing. So here we say we have this matrix which has these entries like capital AX, intermediate state, and the score. And similarly here, and when we multiply them from A and B, I will generate C if there is a production, if there are rules like this. And from X and Y, I will generate X plus Y. Okay? And if there are multiple X's and multiple Y's, I will generate minimum of X plus Y. And it can be shown if you start with just the diagonal entries, that you know the results for single entries in your string, so substrings of length 1. So you start with that matrix and you compute your matrix multiplication like this way, and then you compute the transitive closure. Then at the end, whatever results you get will be exactly same as what you would compute using dynamic programming. Okay? So this is a different way of viewing the dynamic programming computation as computing transitive closure under this special kind of matrix multiplication. So the question is, if this new viewpoint is going to help you to make your algorithm run faster, then we need to answer two questions. So the first one is whether it's possible to compute each of this matrix product first, and then the second question is, can we compute the transitive closure first? Okay, so for each matrix product, it can be shown this basically the running time of each of this matrix product is same as computing mean plus matrix multiplication. So I was trying to emphasize that you have to take mean of the pluses like x plus y, and if there are multiple x's, multiple y's, you'll be taking mean of those, mean of x plus y. So in fact, it can be shown that each of the matrix multiplication time is exactly same as computing mean plus matrix multiplication. So what is mean plus matrix multiplication? So you have the matrix A and matrix B, and your product matrix C, the ijth entry will be minimum over all k, aik plus bkj. Think about computing shortest path that you want to go from vertex I to vertex j. You are looking at shortest path from I to k and k to j, and you are adding them up and you are taking the mean over all k. Okay, so this mean plus product. Now the question is, can you do mean plus product faster than n cube? And the answer is, if you believe in APSP hardness, APSP conjecture, then you cannot, because mean plus product and APSP conjectures, these are equivalent. Okay, so basically then it's really this viewpoint, it seems like it's not helping you much, but then comes the but we are thinking about designing approximation algorithms, and Urey's approximation algorithm from 1998 works for mean plus product and gives you a running time which is n to the omega. Okay? So there is a hope. So if you are allowing approximation, you can compute each of these matrix product fast. So there is a hope that you can, allowing approximation, you can make things faster. So the next thing is computing transitive closure. So in general, computing transitive closure is easy. So you will just, you want to compute h to the n, you will just do repeated squaring log n times, and that's it. And often you can even get rid of this log n factor. But for this special kind of matrix multiplication, it's a bit strange that this matrix multiplication is not even associative. And this comes because of the use of these grammar rules. So you can combine A and B, get C, and then maybe C, you can combine C with some D and get E. But if you are trying to combine B with D, maybe there is no such rules that you can use that to combine. So basically this matrix multiplication is not even associative, and not being associative is a major problem, which means you do not have much flexibility. You cannot just do squares like a square e to the 4. It means like if you have a long parse tree, you have to multiply the matrices in a very fixed way. So you may need to multiply the matrices n times. Okay, so that means the computing of transitive closure could become, it could take a long time. And the second is, even if you have a very good approximation algorithms, your error could propagate n times. So your error at the end could be really large. So what can you do? So the very first thing about computing transitive closure, here is a very nice result from Leslie Valiant from his PhD thesis, where he showed even when your matrix multiplications is not associative, you can still design and divide and conquer algorithms. And the main thing about this divide and conquer algorithm is that in divide and conquer, you generally divide a problem into non-overlapping sub-problems, but here you will divide it into overlapping sub-matrices. And this overlap is, so it's a very nice algorithm. I'm not going into the details of it, but you can use Valiant's algorithm, and you can compute transitive closure even for this kind of matrix multiplication when the underlying operations is not associative in time, which is same as computing single matrix product. Okay? Good. But then what you are trying to do, you are trying to use Valiant's transitive closure along with Zwick's approximation algorithm. And that will already give you some non-trivial results, like you can get into the epsilon approximation factor. in n to the omega time. And why n to the epsilon is basically because when you are using variance transitive closure computation, it's possible that you will be multiplying matrices of dimension into the 1 minus epsilon many times. So the errors will propagate at least into the epsilon times. Okay? So there are some technical reasons why you can get into the epsilon, but not better than that. If you try to use Zwick's algorithm and variance transitive closure methods together. So therefore, we need something else in order to overcome from n to the epsilon. If you want to go to 1 plus epsilon approximation, you need to handle approximating each of this matrix product in a different way. So what do you do here? So first of all, when we are computing mean plus product, using a result from Allen, Galil, and Margalit, again from 1998, and also by Seidel, that you can, if your matrix entries are each integers and they are bounded by some capital R, then you can compute each of this matrix product first in time order of R times n to the omega. Okay, so you need your matrix entries to be bounded and bounded integers by R. This result itself is not directly useful because when you are in your matrix, your entries are edit distance, and the edit distance could be as large as n. So they are really not small values, so we cannot directly use Allen, Galil, and Margalit. But then we can also compute each of these matrix multiplication first if for that an entries itself do not need to be bounded, but the number of distinct entries, number of different values, as long as they are bounded, as long as there are distinct scores, are distinct values, then we can still compute this matrix multiplication fast in R square into the omega time. Okay, and for that we use some construction of Seidel sequences, again from additive combinatorics, and at that time it was in 2015 when I bought that book that Carl mentioned, but buying and reading are not the same thing. Okay, so we can yes. It doesn't preserve the order, so you have to do something more. So it's not just using Seidel sequences. Yeah, so you can compute the matrix multiplication fast, even when there are number of scores are not when the number of scores are not too many. And after that, so then so if there are distinct scores, we can create R natural numbers, and okay, so you can use Seidel sequences to, when the number of entries and number of distinct values are not too many, you can use the Seidel sequence construction and make them like in the range from 1 to R square. And when they are in the 1 to R square, then you can use the Allen, Galil, and Margalit's algorithm and can get an algorithm that runs in R square into the omega time. Okay? So then what is the full algorithm? So the full algorithm is as follows, that you will be using variance transitive closure computation, but after each matrix product, you will use a rounding method in order to have not too many distinct values. So if your original score is say 1 plus delta to the power R plus K, then you will either round it up to 1 plus delta to the R, round it down to 1 plus delta to the R, or you will round it up to 1 plus delta to the power R plus 1, and you will use appropriate probabilities so that on expectation your scores remains the same. And this is like rounding in a dependent fashion, because from one round to the next, what your rounded value will be, it depends on what you have done in your previous rounding state, previous state. So this is analogous, and once you have restricted the number of values, number of distinct values, so now there are at most log n distinct values, then you can use the Seidel sequence construction and get a faster running time. So this is analogous to, if you know the literature in approximation algorithms for NP-hard problems, this is analogous to using, so there is a lot of work on dependent rounding starting from 2000 onward and many variations of it, which had been very useful for rounding linear programs. So here it's kind of analogous way of using it for polynomial time problems. So we are choosing this probability so that on expectation, the score of y remains the same. But you can also show that the variance of y also is bounded, and then you can use concentration inequalities like Chebyshev's inequalities and so on, and that's good enough to give you the desired bounds. And this works for not only for language edit distance, but also for APSP and for other graph-based problems. And I think this is a generic way of designing fast approximation algorithms, because it's not required that your underlying matrix multiplication has to be over mean plus everything. It could be over other algebraic structures as well. And if you can use these rounding methods to restrict the number of values to few distinct values. And there are other ways, not just using the Sidon sequences. There are other ways that when your number of values are not too many, you can reduce computation of matrix multiplication over any algebraic structure to Boolean matrix multiplication. And then you can use this kind of dependent rounding algorithms to get a generic way of designing fast approximation algorithms. So that's one part of it, how you can use dynamic programming and view it as computing matrix multiplication and design fast approximation algorithms. And just to end the story here, like when I was working on this, I also tried to design some lower bounds, and the lower bounds, I had limited success on it. Like I could show some lower bounds for the insertion only case. So where you are not allowing insertion, deletion, and substitutions, but just insertions. And that was kind of a weird phenomena, because you would think that when you are allowing just a single kind of edits, your algorithms should be easier, but it was lower bounds was showing something different. And then we realized with Carl and others that when we have insertion, deletion, and substitutions, the underlying the matrices for which we are doing this mean plus product, they have special structures. And the special structure is, if you look at the rows or look at rows or look at the columns, if you look at the values, these values, they do not differ by too much. So these matrices have Lipschitz property, and this Lipschitz property actually comes from these problems. Like in edit distance problem, think about how much your edit distance can change if I just insert one new symbol or delete one new symbol, etc. So your edit distance will change just by 1 or 2, right? So that's exactly what propagates into this matrix multiplication, into this mean plus product instances. And what we showed is that when you have this kind of Lipschitz matrices, we can compute mean plus product in less than cubic time. And that gave the fast subcubic algorithm for language edit distance, RNA folding, and other problems. And in fact, this Lipschitz property, we'll see it in most sequence problems. Not for graph problems, but most sequence problems will have this Lipschitz properties. And now the next thing that I'm going to talk about, that we will use this Lipschitz property, and I'll show you how you can avoid using fast matrix multiplication, but just use this Lipschitz property and can design faster algorithms with approximations. Okay? And the reason why we want to avoid fast matrix multiplication might be for practical reasons, because people think algebraic methods, like they hide large constant factors. So unless you are really dealing with large, extremely large matrices, they're not very useful in practice. So maybe you do not want to use fast matrix multiplication and just design purely combinatorial algorithms. So how am I doing with time? 15 now. Okay, so that brings to the next method, which is the amnesic dynamic programming. It's what it really says, it says very generic thing. It says that, okay, so in dynamic programming, what you are doing, you are really maintaining a table. So and when you are maintaining a table, for computing each of this entry, you are looking at bunch of previously computed entries. That's exactly what you are doing in dynamic programming. And in amnesic dynamic programming, either you will not be maintaining the entire dynamic programming table, or when you are computing a particular entry in a dynamic programming table, you will be not looking at all the subproblems that you are supposed to look at, and that way you will be saving time and space. Okay, so there are these two different ways where you can use to make your dynamic programming run faster. Okay, so that's the amnesic dynamic programming. So what kind of results do we get here? So we can get for language edit distance from NQ, we can reduce the running time to n square over epsilon with an additive approximation of epsilon n. So think about epsilon, say, as 1 over square root of n. Then you will get an additive approximation of square root of n in n to the 2.5 time. Okay? And if you are thinking about multiplicative approximation, in fact, whatever I showed you, this 1 plus epsilon approximation is n to the omega time is basically optimum. You cannot do anything better if you just allow multiplicative approximation. So you have to allow additive approximation. Now, whether this additive approximation is the best possible or not, I don't know. But you need additive approximation. So similar results you can get for RNA folding in terms of running time. And if you are looking at space complexity, you can use this amnesic dynamic programming, and in fact, you can reduce the space complexity from n square to sublinear, both for language edit distance, RNA folding, and for other problems, for edit distance as well. And the nice thing about this amnesic dynamic programming is that dynamic programming is often very sequential in nature, but because in amnesic dynamic programming we are forgetting states, we are maintaining very few states and so on, you can make them parallel, you can run them in a streaming fashions and so on. Okay, so how do you do it? Just to recall that what we did for language edit distance in dynamic programming, when we are trying to compute a particular entry ij, we are looking at all breakpoints k, right? And we are combining the results from I to k, k minus 1, and k to j. And therefore, to compute each of the entry in your dynamic programming table, you need order of n time. So when we are doing amnesic dynamic programming, what we are going to do, instead of looking all these order of n breakpoints, we are going to sample the breakpoints. We are going to sample a few breakpoints, and we will just look at those k's which are sampled. Okay? So that's what we are going to do for amnesic dynamic programming. Now the question is, how do you sample these breakpoints? The very first starting point could be just do uniform sampling. Right? So you do uniform sampling, maybe you sample just log n breakpoints uniformly, and you just consider those. But that's a very bad idea, and uniform sampling you can just show doesn't matter how your dynamic programming is recursion, right? So you have these recursion trees, doesn't matter how your recursion tree looks like, you will have a terrible approximation factor. Okay, so uniform sampling is not a good idea. Then what could be the next idea? So if you look at this recursion tree, which looks very short and balanced, so in that case, if you look at these leaves, these are like small subproblems that you are solving. And as you go higher up, you are solving larger and larger subproblems. So in a short balanced tree, there are many small subproblems that you need to solve than large subproblems. So maybe an idea will be that you do not want to make too many errors for small subproblems. Okay? So maybe when you are solving small subproblems, you sample many breakpoints, and when you are solving larger subproblems, you become aggressive and you sample more aggressively. Okay, so that could be one idea, that you sample based on the length of the subproblem, and that actually works out for balanced recursion trees. But when you have long recursion trees, as you can see, there are as many leaf nodes as intermediate nodes. So then this doesn't work out, because you will be making a lot of errors for the intermediate nodes, and that will add up to your final error. So this is the third try that make it work out. So this is how you do it. So what you do a non-uniform sampling of breakpoints, and you sample many breakpoints towards the end. Okay, and your sampling of breakpoints becomes lesser and less as you go into the middle. Okay, so this is how the sampling looks like. Like you are trying to solve for the subproblem I to j. You do not want to look at all breakpoints k in between I and j. So you consider, okay, so you consider some parameter here. So here you sample everything. In the next range, which is So I use the k for intermediate points, but forget about that. So suppose k is a parameter here. So in the first interval of size k, you sample all the breakpoints. In the next interval of size 2k, you sample half of the breakpoints. In the next interval of size 4k, you sample 1/4 of the breakpoints and so on. Okay? And you do it starting from j and also starting from I. So then overall it will look like that you are sampling many breakpoints at the end and you are sampling much few as you are going in the middle. So this is the sampling, this is the sampling strategy that works out. And why does it work out? Well, if you look at short and balanced recursion trees, then as I said here, you have many small subproblems. And if there are small subproblems, obviously you are sampling at a much higher rate because everything is either towards I or towards j. Right? So you are not making mistakes in small subproblems anyway. So it works out for short recursion trees. And for long recursion trees, as you can see, how did we get these long recursion trees? Because for every small subproblem, there is a long subproblem. Right? And here the breakpoint is towards one of the end. And in that case, we are again sampling at a very high rate. So we do not make mistakes even for this kind of long recursion trees. So sampling based on the position of the breakpoint seems like the right idea here. And that's when, and you can do the calculation and that works out. And in fact, this kind of strategy will work out for any kind of problems. And you need this Lipschitz property because you might not be computing the exact breakpoint that the optimum algorithm uses, but you are going to use something close by. So you need the Lipschitz property in your problem. And if you have the Lipschitz property, you can use this amnesic dynamic programming and most likely you will get a much faster algorithm with additive approximations. Okay, so that's all that I wanted to talk about. So using dynamic programming, you can make them faster, can make them space efficient by using this fast matrix multiplication or using amnesic dynamic programming. What I have studied so far is like cubic problems. And the question will be whether we can extend these techniques for other higher dimensional problems or even for like quadratic dynamic programming. So this amnesic dynamic programming works out when you are computing each entry in your dynamic programming table, you are looking at many subproblems. And now instead of looking many subproblems, you are sampling from them. So the question is, if that's not the case, if you look at edit distance computation, in edit distance computation, you do not do that. So computing each entry requires just constant time, but you have a n square size matrix. So in this kind of situation, what do you do? So for different other kind of dynamic programming structures, what can you do? And obviously hardness of approximations and so on, these are all like very open. Okay, so that's it. Thank you.